Well, good evening, and welcome to our Young Pastors Journey Conversation Series. I am J. Kevin James Jr., the establisher and creator of the Young Pastors Journey Network. And tonight we're going to have a conversation about multi-generational ministry. And so before we get started tonight, what I need you to do me a big favor, is I want you to go ahead and hit that share button. I want you to share this on your page. In fact, let us know that you are here with us. You can go ahead and comment, let us know that you're here, and share this on your own social media. And I want you to encourage some other pastors or those who aspire to be pastors, or even individuals who just love ministry and want to be a part of this conversation. We want you to join in with us this evening. We're going to have a great time in the midst of this conversation. So we look forward to sharing on tonight. So please, whatever you do, share this with your family and your friends as we come together for tonight's conversation. All right, so I want to go ahead and get started. And again, as the Bible says continuously, we plan, but it is God whose plans will prevail. And so we're going to do things a little bit differently tonight. Some of our panelists are here, and we're making a little bit of alterations to those who could not be on tonight. And so I want to introduce one of our first guests is on here with us on our panel. She is an awesome and phenomenal woman of God who is sharing with us all the way from Jefferson City, Missouri. And so I want to go ahead and introduce to us the Reverend Dr. Cassandra Gould, all the way from Jefferson City, Missouri. I'm also happy to have on with us the beautiful and the lovely First Lady of the Macedonia Church, Lady Rashonda James, who's with us. And I'm also happy to have on here one of my dear friends and who is a great friend of mine, Mr. Justin Shields, who's with us. So again, thank you all for being on here with me tonight as we have this conversation around multi-generational ministry. And again, I want to go ahead and preface this that we've got two preachers on here and two lay folk that's on here. So this should be a good, interesting conversation. But I'm going to go ahead and go to you all individually so that people can just hear from you, and you can just go ahead. I know I introduced you by name, but if you could just go ahead and introduce yourself and share just a little bit about yourself, even as it relates to you as a believer, just maybe even sharing how you came into the faith, maybe your age when you came into the faith or when you were baptized, and just maybe even presently, what is your connection to the church. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with Dr. Gould.
Again, thank you, Pastor James, for this opportunity. Clearly, it was a reminder of which generation I am in, because obviously I'm no longer on the young pastors journey. But grateful to be in this conversation. Again, I'm Cassandra Gould. I'm an ordained elder in the church. I served the last 10 years as a senior pastor, and this year took a year out to serve solely in the public square. I'll thank you for the opportunity to talk about my journey. I've spent a lot of my life in the state of Missouri, most of it in St. Louis, Missouri. I've lived in Kansas City, and for the last 9 years, I've been a dual resident of Jefferson City, Missouri, and St. Louis, Missouri. Originally from a little town in Alabama. Everybody knows Selma, but you probably don't know Demopolis, Alabama, 47 miles west of Selma. And I found Jesus from the Mourner Bench down at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church on Rural Route 80 when I was a 10-year-old little girl. I've never known myself without church. I, grew up in a very traditional Black Southern family where faith was one of the primary tenets. The only time I've ever been out of church is if I was sick or even on vacation. I usually go to church. So have not known myself without knowing myself as an active part of ministry, first as a lay person. And after a whole lot of years of wrestling, I really believe that it was at age 10 that God called me. Had a conversation with God. First time I ever heard the audible voice of God. And God said, just like the moon is in the sky and is set apart, I've set you apart for a work. I didn't know what that was when I was 10, but I knew that God and I had something special going on. And so after a whole lot of years of running, I've been in ministry for the last 15 years. I run an organization, Missouri Faith Voices, that operates at the intersection of faith and politics. So I am in my season this year. I'm in my lane, and the lane is keeping me obviously very busy. Also founder of a ministry that is now where everybody is, DigiChurch, Beyond the Wall. So that's me. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Pastor, for sharing. All right, we'll go ahead to Lady James. If you go ahead and just introduce yourself to us as well.
Hi, everyone. I am Lady Rashonda James. I serve as director of our family ministries, really looking over much of the programming and spiritual enrichment for our women's, men's, youth, and young adult ministries. I came into the knowledge of salvation at age 8. I spent much of my life in church under some dynamic women who were from the holiness faith. So really had a strict upbringing of no jeans, no earrings, and all of those things. But my mother was very, very progressive. And so at age 12, I joined my first church, which was First Mount Olive Free Will Baptist Church in Baltimore, Maryland, where I was a member until I ended up transitioning to St. Louis and joining Macedonia Baptist Church in 2017. There I have served in the youth choir, youth and young adult choir, and now I'm the director and also the first lady.
Thank you so much for sharing. All right, Justin, just go ahead and introduce yourself to us here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Shield. Like Pastor said, we are really, really good friends. I'm in Baltimore, Maryland. I guess I'll start off. I grew up in the church. My mother's father, my grandfather, was a Baptist preacher in North Carolina. So always been in the church. Was baptized at the age of 11 at Colonial Baptist on Reisterstown Road. Stayed in the church, left Colonial Baptist and went to Grace Fellowship, where I continued in their youth ministry throughout middle school and high school, doing a number of missions trips and, just doing a lot of development with them. We did a lot of ministry trips to Ocean City for, big gatherings and things of that nature. And now I am currently a member of Bridgeway Community Church in Columbia, Maryland, under Dr. Anderson, who is actually the brother of the pastor at Colonial Baptist Church.
Thank you so much for sharing. And again, so I'm gonna go ahead for those of you who may not know who I am. I'm J. Kevin James Jr. I have the pleasure and the honor of serving as the senior pastor of the Macedonia Baptist Church here in the city of East St. Louis in the Metro East area. I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and that's really where my faith journey began. I was blessed to grow in a Christian family, and both of my parents were involved in church, and so I had no other choice but to go to the church house, and it was there that I developed my personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And at the age of 7 years old, I gave my life to the Lord. And from there, I just began to develop in my growth. I began preaching at the age of 8. And subsequently, matriculating through my education process, I went to seminary. And from there in 2016, I was blessed to be called to pastor the Macedonian Church, where I have been for almost 4 years now. So it's been a blessing to be on this Christian journey. And I want to go ahead at this time and bring my friend and brother on, Pastor Joseph Manaway. So, man, if you just go ahead and introduce yourself to the people.
Well, good evening, everyone, and please excuse my tardiness. I hit Pastor James and told him I got my times all mixed up being on the West Coast. And so please excuse my tardiness. But good evening, everyone who is watching us. As aforementioned by my brother, my name is Joseph Manaway. I serve as youth and young adult pastor and staff pastor of Mount Calvary Baptist Church in Fairfield and Sassoon, California. My pastor is Dr. Claiborne Lee Jr. Prior to being here, I got here about 1.5 years ago now. Prior to being here, I served as assistant pastor of Second Baptist Church in Las Vegas, Nevada. Before that, I am a PK, I'm a pastor's son, pastor's kid. And so church life is really all I know. I've been a junior deacon. I was an usher. I was on the mime team. They put me off the mime team because I couldn't remember the movements. I've been a musician. I've been the AV guy, the cameraman, all of that. Everything there is to do in church, I've been. I accepted my call to ministry at the age of 17, the summer going into my senior year of high school. So, and just from there, I'm just a staff pastor, itinerant minister, and I'm just honored to be on here today with my brother. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being on with us. Now, listen, as we begin this conversation, I thought it was interesting. Since I've been at my church, Macedonia, one of the approaches that I have tried to take to ministry is to really look at this dynamic of multi-generational ministry. And again, I'll be the first to say I have not mastered it, but it is something that I am continuously working towards and continuously learning. And I thought that it was interesting that CNN had released this article talking about the 6 generations that presently live in the United States, or as Dr. Gould would say, these ununited states of America. And so I just kind of want to give like a little preface to that. So the 6 generations are this. One, there's the GI generation. So that's 1901 to 1926. So these are the children of our World War II veterans. These are those who were young during the Great Depression time, and those who really developed a personal devotion for their civic duty, which we talk about voting. Then there's the silent generation. That's the 1925 to 1945. But that's that generation where you really begin to see a lot of our iconic film actors and actresses coming out of there. But it's interesting that even out of that generation, from a presidential standpoint, there has never been a president from that generation to serve. But then you have your baby boomer generation. So that's that 1946 to 1964. And they call those the baby boomers because it was during that generation that we saw a boom in the birth rate. So we know what people were doing during that generation. All right. And then we have the Generation X, or as they would call them, the busters. That's 1965 to 1980. And it's interesting that in 2016, this generation and the millennial generation outnumbered all of the previous generations for voting. And then you have our millennial generation. So that's 1981 to 1996, which this generation, our generation, for those who are on here, my generation, we are ones that are obtaining more degrees. And a funny tip is that more of us are staying at home longer than moving out. And then we have Gen Z, which is your 1997, that some would say to the present, but I would even argue that since 2013, we have another generation that has emerged. So again, I said all of that to say this, that we are literally in a day, in a time where you have 7 or 6 to 7 different generations all under one roof, and everybody has their own self-interest, right? Everybody has their own idea and their perception of what church should look like and how church should be. And so in this day and age, we are seeing that this conversation that needs to be had when we talk about multi-generational ministry, it's very important. And so, Dr. Gould, I kind of want to lean on you just for a moment from just looking at it from a perspective of your generation and just representing your generation. Can you kind of give us some perspective to those who are of the millennial or of the Gen Z that are watching? What was the idea, or what still is the idea when we talk about church and what ministry looks like from your generation?
Yeah, and so I often forget that I'm from my generation. So sometimes I don't know the answer to that question because it's always the thing that I thought was most problematic about church. I'm kind of the, some might call me the rebel pastor or something like that. So tradition means a lot to, pardon me, to that generation. This notion of thing, and a Methodist, right? I'm AME. So, you know, you walk into church, you want the call to worship, all of this, right? I every now and then I'm a little creative, and because of my activism and being a community organizer, I'm always steeped in what's going on today, right? And so when you change the call to worship or the responsive reading in a Baptist context, that causes angst oftentimes for baby boomers, even for some of those who are on the latter part of that, as admittedly I am, causes a little angst for people. People are accustomed to things being a certain way. It is generation of, I can remember when, so simple things, which is not about the church, but it is how life is shaped. When I bought a house and then decided I was selling the house and changing jobs, and my mother thought I was losing my mind, right? Because this is also a generation that, for the most part, they found the one good job. They stuck to that one good job until retirement. They bought the one house, right? They take pride in paying for that house and, you know, leaving it to the children. And now what they are also dealing with is the cognitive dissonance of a new generation of people who will not have one house, will not have, I mean, I've owned 4 that I've lived in, and more than that I've actually owned. I didn't work one job, right? So I'm, like I said, I got other tendencies, but I understand the generation that I'm born in. So that is the generation that often when they heard in something's bulletin, or God forbid there's not a that struggle. They're trying to figure out, how are you changing things and what was wrong with that are necessary to change. And so I think just the sense of tradition. It is also the people who came through an educational systems when rote learning was a thing you memorized. You just did this over and over and over again until you got it. And innovation may have looked a little different, right? So they're not always accustomed to things, to innovation. And we'll talk about technology, I'm sure, later.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Listen, I want to ask this question, and Manaway, I'm gonna come to you, man. What do you feel is a barrier when we talk about multi-generational ministry? What do you feel is a barrier?
I think one of the most glaring barriers that I find in church is I feel that us, like myself, you, James, probably Justin, Lady James. I think that we have to serve as like how can I put it, the translators for multi generations. I think that one barrier is, the older generation thinks that our Jesus ain't Jesus because he's, connected to an 808 trap beat, but then we don't think their Jesus is putting us to sleep because it's behind some boring major chords and hymns. So we have to kind of be I think there's just a communicational barrier there that, that everybody's Jesus is worth listening to and worth engaging and worth, honoring. And I just think that it's just that I feel like the younger ones need to be a little bit more patient. And I think the older generations have to remember that you were once our age too. So I think that one of the major barriers is communication. I think that's why God kind of placed some of us in the body of Christ so that we can kind of be that translation. And I think the older generation just has to remember that you were 19, 21, 25, 30 at one time too. You know what I'm saying? So that's just one major barrier or some barriers that I see.
Gotcha. Justin, for you as a lay individual that's attending church or just being a part of ministry in the kingdom, what do you feel is a barrier?
That's a great question. I feel like it's a certain number of things, really. With the younger generations in particular, like the millennials, we see that we travel a lot, and we're not afraid to pick up and go. And I think that creates a barrier as far as the community aspect of how church used to be viewed. How everyone that went to church on Sunday were in the same community. Everyone knew each other's names. Where now, if I get a job in, let's say, St. Louis, I have to pick up and go. I don't feel as comfortable just going to a different church and then picking up where I left off in the place that I passed was. So I definitely think that for our generation, I think that creates a barrier. And then, to be honest, I think that we are the generation of information. And I think that creates somewhat of a barrier as well, because everyone is going to nowadays, what they say, fact check everything. So it's them picking up the phone, Googling here and there. It's just a couple of different things that I think that creates that barrier. And I think that with what Joseph was saying, as far as our generation needs to be a little bit more patient. But I think that the older generation also has to be a little bit more open as well. So it sort of goes hand in hand as far as getting rid of those barriers, because it just doesn't create that sense of community or family that the church was built on. So I think that those are just a few that I can think of the top of my head.
That's good. And so, I thought something was very, very interesting. Somebody had posted on Facebook, one of my friends had posted about our current election system, right? How we have two individuals that are running against each other. And in November, no matter who wins out of November's election, we are going to have essentially a senior citizen as our president, right? And I just mentioned to you that CNN pointed out that Gen X and the millennial generation in 2016 outnumbered baby boomers, outnumbered the GI generation, the silent generation, in the amount of voters in 2016. So I think that it's interesting that we, from a younger generation perspective, or even from middle age or season, we're always talking about having the younger generation stepping up taking their lead, taking their rightful place. And here it is when we're talking about the next leader of our country is a senior citizen. What's going on here? You know, what is the issue with younger leadership? And is there some level of distrust that we as a community may have of a younger individual? Because when we look at even the past presidents, most individuals, when they have experienced their inauguration, have been either close to 50 or if not over 50. So what is this? And I guess I'll come to you, Justin, come back to you. Is there a distrust for younger leadership in our generation or in our time?
I don't know if it's necessarily distrust. I feel like the problem could be sort of the fear of change. I think that honestly, when something is in place for so long and things are going such a certain way for years and years and years, it's very hard for some people to just accept that everything is changing. And you know, that creates, it goes back to the last point that we were talking about, is barriers as well. You know, the world is changing and things need to evolve with the world. And I think that creates, you know, barriers in every aspect of life. The older generation see us, I can speak on, you know, just in job searching or anything like that. You know, the millennials are looked at as job hoppers or just ones that will just go and pick up and go like no problem at all. And I don't think that it's necessarily, you know, the job hopping thing. I think it's, you know, we are adapting to the new society. So it's just the world is changing and evolving, and we just need to have more of an open mind to the world evolving in order to create change. Because if you're not open to change, you're not going to allow it. Or, I mean, we have people that have been in seats for a very long time, and you know, if they're not open to the change, then it's just not going to happen. So I think that, you know, having that open mind and having those discussions is what creates change. And, you know, it's something that just needs to happen.
So basically, you know, what I'm hearing from you, and I think that that's a good and a great point to make. And I hope that those who are watching and listening tonight from different generations is really understanding this fact that we have something in common. All of us, no matter your age, no matter your ethnicity, no matter your gender identification, all of us as human beings have some level of resistance and struggle with change. All of us have some issue when it is looking different or it is causing or pushing us out of our comfort zone. Manaway, I want to hear from you, man. What do you feel, even when we talk about leadership? Because if we look at most of our churches, we're not really seeing this multi-generational leadership. You know, we're even if we're seeing a younger pastor, and I can attest to it for myself. When I first arrived at Macedonia, my leadership did not look what it looks like now in a multi-generational aspect, and it still may not necessarily be to the magnitude that we desire. But what is that?
I believe that a lot of it is for the older generations, Pastor, is that we have the privilege of having something that a lot of the generations that are older than us did not have, and that is we have what I call external validity. So many of us now, we are, you know, we're more degree than ever before. We have more, you know, senior jobs than ever before. We have higher positions in society than ever before. And so we're validated externally in the world outside of the church. The issue is that so many of our forefathers, the church was the only place that they could have a title and feel validated. You understand? So it's almost like a subconscious thing where they hold on to that because I'm not much in the world, but in here, I'm the pastor here, or I'm Reverend so-and-so here, I'm the deacon here. And so I think it's subconscious just to hold on to, that place of validation and feeling needed. And I feel like that's where the older generations can fall at times. But however, in the same token, I believe that sometimes we don't really see transgenerational leadership. If that's the older portion, the younger portion is we have to make ourselves available. We have to make ourselves faithful. We have to make ourselves teachable. That they have to feel if we already identify that they're somewhat reluctant to turn it over, we have to make sure that they feel safe enough to turn something over to us. I think Justin nailed it when he says we're the generation, man, that as soon as we get a better job offer, or as soon as, what I'm saying, if the grass even appears to be green over there, or I don't even care if it's grass, if it's just turf, if they spray paint it, you know what I'm saying? It could be concrete, but it's spray painted green. Even if it appears, we're moving. And so I think that as the older generations can be so reluctant to turn it over, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we're faithful, available, and teachable, and that we're capable of being trusted to, have things handed over to us. So again, I think it's, what I'm saying? I think that it's both and not either or.
That's good. In fact, I want us. We just lifted this question and start, and I'm happy to see my brother Pastor Donald Wright on here with us, tuning in. He says, is it a distrust for leadership, or does the younger generation just not value the system enough to be a part of it? Dr. Gould, come on and chime in on this thing.
Because, if it's about politics, I certainly have an answer for that. So I think it's twofold. I think that, so for some of the people in your generation, so some of the movement you actually learned from even maybe your parents, depending on how old they were, they may not have also been the ones that had the one job for 40 years, right? I remember as an AME, I remember standing on the floor of a connectional, that's just our global meeting of lay people, and back when I was young, and like screaming and crying with a group of other young folks. Some of them still young. They're out there. I was almost at the cuff of they just let me in because I didn't have great bread. But we were naming that we ran companies, and we, by then I was on my second house and, raising a family and etc. But y'all don't want us to really lead in the church, right? And so I think those things that have been named around gatekeeping is also true. I can remember I had more than one home church, being the youngest officer, and I was like in my 30s, right? Like really close to 40. And there being people that are kind of looking at me sideways, like, I don't really know. I was an officer at the largest financial institution, not just in America, and 3 branches at one time. So you're looking at me sideways, like maybe I shouldn't be on your finance team. When I am handling multi-million-dollar accounts every hour, not even just every day. So there's that happens into the church. But the flip side to Pastor Wright, his comment caught my attention as soon as he wrote it, is there's this way in which some of the younger generations, want to just blow up everything without thinking about, so what do you put in its place? So I'm all about dismantling and disrupting things, right? Right now, I want to defund the police and all of that, right? But when I was in the streets of Ferguson, there was all this conversation around this ain't your grandmama's civil rights movement. Well, kind of it is, because actually some of the things that you're actually doing right now, if my grandma wouldn't have been out there doing them, you wouldn't have even been able to do it, right? And so there's this way in which we got to start having more bridging conversations so that there's a two-way street about how we share. We cannot have the attitude so more young people collectively voted, right? But then there were also people who sit out because I don't want either one of these old white people. until we create another system, you stuck with one of these old white people, right? And you got to make the decision which one of these old white people are going to be less risky for me. And so there's this way in which when you talk about people running, they got to be 35 to even start thinking about being the president. But it's not as much that young people have tried and been shot down. It is where it is, I think there's still a vacuum in some spaces of young people actually going down that trajectory and actually making a decision that this is the system that we have now. It is not the best system. I'm an advocate of a whole different system, but it is the system we got now. And so I am going to work in this system as opposed to standing outside of the system and then critiquing on the inside of it. And so I do think I'm looking for folk who want to run. Mitch McConnell was elected before some of y'all was born, right? 1984, like that's like ridiculousness, right? And so it is great opportunity for young folk to run in the public square and to just like stand your ground even in the church, right? And just remind folk, like, listen, I show up here. I might not show up as often as you do because I probably got more stuff to do than you have to do. But I show up here too. I invest in this church. I pay my tithes, whatever. I do what you don't see my check because I'm on Give a Fire Cash App. But I am a part of this too, and I have something to say. Every revolution that was ever had, including the Christian revolution with Jesus Christ, was led by folk. So I think there's a way in which we have to just be encouraged, and y'all can't leave the scene. You got to just like stay, whether it's in politics or in the church, and you might have to, fight for your space. But I believe it was a fight I had to have. But I believe it's a fight worth having because we are better when we are actually finding a role for everybody in every generation.
And that's good. I really appreciate you for sharing those words and saying that. And I just want to, again, just encourage some pastor or leaders, church leaders that are on here, or just leaders in your own organization, that one of the things that you have to do is create the space for the healthy conversation, to create the space for the conversation of, if we're realizing that we as a church, as an organization, want to be able to preserve not just our legacy, but to stand firm in the work of ministry, it's going to require us to have the conversation of what does multi-generational ministry look like for our church? Because I want this to be clear tonight, that we're not giving you a one size fit all, that everybody's ministry is going to be different, and how you go about this is going to be different. But some of the commonalities is that there must be a conversation that you as a pastor, as an organizer, as a president, vice president, whomever, that you are open to having this conversation and being able to sit in the toughness of this conversation. Because the reality is, this multi-generational ministry or multi-generational leadership for your organization is going to require some tough conversation, right? And it's going to push some of us out of our comfort zone and what we're used to. But I need us all to remember that all of us are being pushed out of some place of comfort. And it's all for the betterment of our organizations, the betterment of our churches as we seek to move forward. And I had to remind myself of this, that oftentimes you got to get back to the root of your why. Why are you in this? Why do you exist as an organization? Why do you hold the position that you do? And beginning to recognize and answer why it is that you're in this work, then it also has to remind you that everybody else that's at this table too, or everybody that's a part of this organization as well, they have a why. And my why is not better than yours. We all have some value in this thing, and we have to be able to have this conversation and be all right with the fact that we don't all have the answers and we don't all have the right model for this thing that we call multi-generational ministry. And so, Justin, I want to come back to you just kind of as a married man in church. And we know in this day and time that that's kind of a point for nostalgia right there. The fact that, you know, a brother, young brother, married in the church, want to be invested in the church. So just kind of speaking to that point, when we talk about ministry, and for those of us who are listening, I want to hear from you as a lay person. When you look at a church and a ministry, and when you think of effective ministry, what does that look like for you as an individual?
Sure. Great question. I know I've said it a few times, but to me, what I look for is just a ministry that has, like I said, an open mind. Because, you know, anytime that I you know, you hear any time closed out or just not open to the change. Like I said, the world is always changing. To be honest, it's great that this actually came up, because the pastor of my church, Dr. Anderson, has a podcast, and his podcast was about almost the same topic, talking about, you know, millennials do God, but why don't millennials do church? And, you know, he just had a very open forum, let people call in and talk. And, you know, the biggest things that you were hearing were really, you heard the millennials that pack up and move. So the family, community aspect wasn't there. The millennials always feel like we're always busy, right? So feeling like, Sunday morning, I can't get up, you know, but I will tune in, you know, I'll tune in online, I'll stream it, which, you know, I think more people have to be a little bit more comfortable, because especially right now in the times that we're in, you know, things are changing to that Zoom and everything. Streaming is huge. So, you know, you have to be a little bit more open and just being able to allow, you know, streaming and allowing it being okay for somebody to say, you know, I can't make it in this Sunday, but I'll definitely stream in and tune in. So I'm still won't be missing. I might not be in person, but I'll still be there. And I think that that's something that needs to be okay with anybody of any generation. So something that I look for is just that openness, and I look for being, you know, a younger married guy. I look for, you know, people that surround me that look like me in the church. So I look for a church with a lot of younger married couples with kids. I have 2 children, one 5 and one that just turned 2. So, you know, I look for, you know, the same atmosphere. You know, I don't mind, you know, seeing different generations, because, you know, you have to be able to learn from, you know, you can learn from younger generations, you can learn from older generations. So I love the diversity of generations, having different generations, but I do believe that I like to see, you know, a mass majority of people that look like me, that surround me. So I know that I feel like I'm in a safe place to be able to talk the way, you know, I would talk, and I don't have to really cover up for anybody. So, you know, that's a big thing that I look for as far as, you know, a multi-generational ministry.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you. So, Dr. Gould, I know you have you've taken a sabbatical, and we're looking forward to the day that you come back to the great work of pastoring. But I know you're out there. You're out there in the trenches. You're dealing with millennials. You're dealing with baby boomers, Gen X, GI generation. What are some of the things that you're hearing when it comes to ministry, church? What are people looking for?
Yeah, I think the trust factor makes a big deal, makes a big difference. I was with another group of faith leaders earlier today, and I shared with them, like, if I was 30 years younger and maybe not born on the family tree that I was born on, I might not do church either. Like, I would do Jesus, but I wouldn't do church. Because there are barriers. We don't make people safe in church. We try to create many me's, many little Christian me's. We want a little Christian army. You got to dress like this. You got to talk like this. You got to look like this. Pull your skirts too short, the pants too low, like all of that, right? And so people don't need to be vilified. That we got society to do that for them. Things that I hear, and I really try to steep all of my work in bridging a gap between the streets and the church. Things I heard like in the streets of Ferguson when clergy first arrived, and they're like, okay, you proved your point, get up and go home. It's a very paternalistic approach, not valuing young people and adults, right? Not valuing adults as being adults, but always condescending. And the one thing that's for sure about current generation, your generation, maybe those a little younger than you all, thanks be to God, like there was this way in which you all were shaped without what I call Negro respectability politics. And so you got to earn respect, right? Like folk in my generation, if you see, you Miss Mary and whatever, this generation is like, where are your receipts? Like, are you respecting me, right? And not that people are going to automatically disrespect somebody, but they're not just going to respect you because you are the pastor. They want to know, like, where do you stand in regard or in proximity to the issues that I'm experiencing? And so, I have some level of street credibility because I'm willing to be in the trenches with younger people and to listen to them. You talked about that creating space. And so creating space is not just about us telling you how to get somewhere and what we did and etc. It's also about us listening and understanding and the collaborative sharing that might be done. And the way I've seen folk do church is we only want young folk to share when they're trying to get us on Facebook or help with some technology, right? Like you don't know anything else, right? Like you didn't spend all your money and all these student loans so that you can go and help somebody use their iPhone. And so I have been like amazed and embarrassed in this time period with colleagues who, like, in 2020, you actually never imagined being online. It actually took a pandemic for you to even believe that you should be online. I'm embarrassed. I am straight embarrassed. But it is about like this generational blindness that some of us have, that no, this is how we're doing it because this is how we're going to do it. Church attendance and all of that has been down for years, and we just close our eyes, right? Because we're gonna keep doing it this way. And so it's really the definition of insanity that we've been embodying. And I believe that God has all of us out of the church right now. I don't believe God caused the pandemic, but I believe that God is using the pandemic. Everybody is out of the church right now. So all of that rhetoric around the unchurched, everybody unchurched. So I'm just hearing young folk want to be validated. They want to be affirmed. They just want to be respected. And they want to trust you that you're not trying to change them. I'm not talking about soteriology or their salvation, that you're just not trying to change the essence of who God made them to be.
Yeah. And so to that point, Manaway, I want to come over to you as a millennial who is a pastor. How do we, in this mix of multi-generational ministry, because I understand that as the younger generation, that yes, we should be, our voices should be heard, and not just heard, but we should be a part of the decision making and should be a part of the leadership in every aspect of ministry. But how do we still operate in a level of love, care, compassion, and honor for the generation that has come before us that still has value, right? Because I think both of us can attest to the fact that for our baby boomer generation, for our GI generation, a lot of them are feeling displaced, or they feel like they're being pushed out. And so how do we still operate in this mode of moving forward while also still seeing the value of having these entities or of generations at the table?
Well, I believe scripture says that he called the young because they're strong, but he called the older because they know the way. So I believe that as strong as we are at this time in our lives, that we're entering the part of our lives where I like to call the prime of churchmanship, where our acumen and our ability collide. That we've been kind of in ministry for a little while, and we have the physical ability to carry those things out. Now, the older generation, they may not have the ability physically, but they have that acumen down. So I think one way for us to still honor them is just to educate ourselves to know. I think that Dr. Gould spoke to it earlier, that the only reason we're able to march today is because they marched before. The only reason why we can put Jesus to a trap beat is because great grandmama and them at first put him to some blues chords. You know what I'm saying? So educating ourselves to understand, and we can't be guilty of being the generation that knew not Joseph. Exodus 1 says, understanding that, that we're standing on a foundation and really educating ourselves to be able to appreciate what the boomers and the GI generations have built, but understanding and discussing with them, sitting down with them, taking time to converse with them and to understand how did you all do it? And, just taking what they did and just making it relevant for our context. And so I think that's it, man. Just education and conversation, just really understanding that we didn't get here by osmosis, but then taking time to really honor them and talk with them to understand, so that's what I believe, man. I've been saying, Kev, that I believe that as the fathers built sanctuaries, the sons will build sound stages. And this pandemic has showed us, man, that church is going to continue to look real different over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. You know what I mean? But even with church being different, that our method may change, but our message will remain. And so really talking with the generation and seeing that there's value in their wisdom.
And that the daughters also build sanctuaries.
Right.
Let me add that as a church builder.
I love it.
My name's on the cornerstone. Let me add that, okay?
The fathers and mothers built sanctuaries.
There you go.
Get it together.
Excuse me, Doc. I meant no harm, by that.
Yeah, I love that, and you're right about it, Manaway, in that vein of the conversation. And my prayer is for those who are watching it, and there's even great conversation that's happening over here in our comment section. I'm going to raise this one. Shafiq says, it's not the millennial mindset. It's the simple fact that if you are not with change, you will be left behind. And I think that's a powerful statement, that one thing is for sure. One thing is consistent and constant, and that is change. And we're ever evolving and we're ever moving. And it's all right to move forward and realize that moving forward is not a disrespect to the past. It is not a disrespect to being able to do greater. And I want to transition us on this part because I know the hour is drawing near. But when we talk about this new wave of ministry, I'll just kind of put it like this. At Macedonia, our last 5 members have been virtual members. So these are people who have not stepped foot into our physical building, but have now united with our church. And so this is creating a whole nother avenue of thinking when it comes to what does it look like to be a member? What does it look like to be a part of Macedonia? And so I just kind of want to go around to each of you. When we talk about this place of virtual ministry in connection with multi-generational ministry, and Justin, I'm gonna come to you as a lay person. For you, what makes you still feel connected even in the midst of you not being physically in the building?
definitely say that everything, like I said, even with work for me, everything is turning virtual for most people, right? So the virtual being virtual is just what has to happen. So if you're not willing to change and stream, I might go to someone else who is streaming their service, and I'm gonna hop in right there. And if I feel comfortable, it's just like Shafiq mentioned. Like if you're not willing to change, then you're gonna get left behind. What happens whenever you call a store and you ask them if they have an item in stock? If they say no, what are you gonna do? You're gonna hang up. You're gonna call the next store, and you're gonna see if they have that item in stock. So it's the same way. If you're not willing to change and adapt to the world that we are living in currently, you're gonna get left behind. And I don't think that it's a problem because you know even a younger generation, we are searching for the knowledge, right? So we are looking for somebody to give us that knowledge, whether it be virtual, whether it be in person, whether it be you know Bible study, anything. We're continually searching for that knowledge, and I feel like that is one of the misconnects that's going on, is that younger generations, they just don't care. That's not true. We care, and we, like Dr. Gold said earlier, we just want to be respected and we want our voices heard, right? So we are going to continue to search for that knowledge. And if you are not willing to give me the knowledge that I'm searching for or make me feel comfortable in this certain setting, then I'm out and I'm going to somebody else that I'm getting that knowledge from. So I think that the virtual aspect is very important because it's coming. Like the world that we are in, the train is coming, and if you're not ready to hop on board, you're gonna get left at the station. So I definitely think that that's very important.
Thank you, man. Man, away, come to you. What does that look like for you when we talk about this virtual piece? How do we still keep people connected and engaged, even though we can't physically touch or physically be in the building?
Well, I concur with everything that Justin said, but just to piggyback a few things. Well, really, just one thing for me is that our challenge has become, because like you said, Pastor, that I want to say over this, since the third Sunday in March, since we've been sheltered in place, we've had some 50, 60 members join our ministry through, our e-church, so to speak. And so now the challenge going forward is, how do we render to them the same services as we would a member who lived down the street? I.e., if that's premarital counseling, marital counseling, if that's family greeting, if that's home dedications or baby dedications. So using technology to render the same services and the rights and privileges as we would a member that could walk through the doors. So even if that means setting aside a time just to fellowship or to talk with e-members, the same way that you would be able to gather together for Bible study. Sure, you can stream Bible study, but how much better would it be for your e-members to be able to connect with each other virtually, the same way that your members can come together and study? And that's not to pull them away or make them less of a member than the ones who can come, but just being able to still touch them without being able to feel them, being able to directly speak to them, look at them, talk to them, meet their needs the same way you would someone who could physically be there. So I think that's the next great challenge that we'll find, not just being able to preach to them on Sunday or stream a Bible study Tuesday or Wednesday, but to be there for them personally and individually.
That's good. Dr. Gould, what's your take on that? Your perspective?
Yeah. So when I finished my doctoral work in 2012, my title was Beyond the Walls, and that has been like the ethos of my ministry when I was in the church. It is now a digi church, like everybody's a digi church, right? And what I believe is, like, I won't rehash what everybody said, right? Like using the tools of technology. I can remember tomorrow will be 7 years since we marched into the new church that a girl built. I'm gonna mess with you, Joseph. But before then, right, I had members who had actually found me because we were streaming on Facebook, right? And they would just kind of follow every Sunday, and then they were in the community, so they eventually came to the church, right? I think we have been shaped around this kind of binary constructs, is either this or is that, right? So I'm gonna stream or I'm not gonna stream, and so we make those kinds of decisions. I'm gonna cater to the young people, or I'm gonna cater to the seasoned saints, as opposed to what you're doing in Macedonia with this multi-generational approach. A brother and classmate of mine, everybody knows, E. Dewey Smith. He takes some heat sometimes because, folk were dancing in the church. Every church anniversary, he does music, whether you are, Drake age or whether you listening to rhythm and blues. But that is just indicative of trying to find commonalities and celebrating differences. And so I think as we go forward, we have to be able to hold all of it together. Even, right now in my role of running an organization, I got volunteers who I can't get in. I can't, have a pizza party with you and all of that, because you're calling from your home, but you're no less a volunteer than the people that I would gather in a room. And so it is our ability to do both and to stop thinking around these bifurcated ways of either we're doing this or either we're doing that. I see somebody in the chat talking about this way of bringing the past into the future. I preached yesterday about Sankofa, and, they go back and get it. And so the Sankofa bird is walking forward with a head back, with an egg in its mouth, because it's looking toward the past, moving toward the future, standing in the present, but also planting seeds for the future, right? That egg is the seed. And so I believe that the role of the church is to do all of that. We cannot do either or we are at risk of leaving too many people behind.
Wow, that's powerful. And we often forget that God reminds us of that simple thing. I am the God of yesterday, today, and the God of forevermore. And so I hope that for those of you who have watched us tonight, have been encouraged, pastors, leaders, members, that you have been encouraged to remember that we're looking to which we have come, standing in where we are right now and moving towards where we want to go. And I'm continuously praying for you, pastor, leader, that God would continue to grant you and give you wisdom in this season on how to lead your individual ministries and organizations through this tough time. We've never been in something like this before, but we've had some similar things to happen as it relates to being pushed out of our comfort zone. And so we can look to how our foremothers and forefathers were able to handle these situations, and how we can continue to move forward as a people, as a generation. And so again, I want to thank our panelists tonight for joining us. Thank y'all so much for taking time out of your schedules to be a part of this conversation. And again, I hope that those of you that are watching have been blessed by this conversation that we have had. And again, we will continue, and I challenge you as a pastor, as a leader. If you're just a lay member watching, I challenge you to go back and share this with your pastor, share this with your leader, share this with your organization, to say, hey, we need to begin to have this conversation of multi-generational ministry. And I want to challenge you that even as you have this conversation, remember to always keep at the forefront of the conversation, what is our end goal? What do we want to happen out of this? Because we don't want to get into the habit of always having conversation and not allowing the conversation to produce mobility or to produce something that we can look at and say, this is the result of the conversation that we've had. So again, I'm praying for you pastors, for leaders, for those of you who are watching, that this conversation will spark other conversations and spark the change that is necessary. Listen, before we get off of here tonight, I do want to say a prayer with each and every one of you, especially for you, my brother, my sister, pastor, who is out there that is leading during this time. I want to encourage you that no matter what you have been experiencing during this COVID-19 season, and even during this time of transition in ministry from this physical aspect to this virtual aspect, I want you to know that the God that you serve is able to bring you through this season, not just all right, but God can bring you through this season excelling like you've never done before. Some of you, your testimony might be like mine. I've been able to get so much more accomplished in this season of what we call stillness than I was in the season of moving constantly. And so let's pray. Let's pray together. Father God, our God who is great and greatly to be praised, and for even those who consider you as God, our mother, Lord, we pray right now in the name of Jesus that God, you would continue to guide our leadership in this country as it relates to not just government, but also in our spiritual institutions. God, I pray right now that as you lead us as women and men in the pastorate, that Lord, you would continue to give us your peace, continue to give us, oh God, your patience, and continue to grant us your wisdom to be able to lead during this time. God, thank you that you have brought us to the cusp of transformation and that you are downloading into us intellectually and spiritually the knowledge that we need to go into this next season. I pray for the one that is watching that may not be a clergy person, but maybe a lay person that really loves their church and wants to see the ministry move forward. God, I pray that you would help them to develop, oh God, a voice to be able to share their love and their passion and even share in the conversation for transformation. God, I thank you because you remind us in your word that we plan, but it is you, oh God, who allows the plans to prevail according to your will. So God, strengthen us in this season and help us, oh God, to cultivate and to be the salt of the earth right now. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. 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 God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for being a part. And we want you to remember that you are indeed a gift from God. Have a blessed night.